Nathan Rodriguez stared at the empty champagne glass in his hand, watching the golden liquid catch the light from the crystal chandelier above. Around him, 200 wedding guests laughed, danced, and celebrated the union of his business partner Jake and his new bride. But Nathan might as well have been a ghost sitting at table 12. He had positioned his wheelchair at the corner table, hoping for the best view of the ceremony and reception. Instead, he got the perfect view of everything he felt he could never have again. Couples swayed on the dance floor to a slow jazz melody, their bodies moving together like they had been created for this exact moment. Children ran between tables, their bright red and blue party dresses creating streams of color across the marble floor. Elderly couples sat hand in hand, sharing quiet conversations and gentle smiles. Nathan adjusted his navy blue suit jacket and tried to remember the last time someone had actually looked at him during a social gathering. Not looked past him, not looked down at him with pity, but really looked at him like he was still a whole person. 5 years had passed since the accident that left him paralyzed from the waist down, and 5 years since most people stopped seeing Nathan Rodriguez the man and only saw Nathan Rodriguez the disability. "Hey Nathan, glad you could make it," Jake had said earlier, his voice carrying that particular tone people used when they felt sorry for someone. The ceremony was beautiful, wasn't it? Marie looked amazing in her dress. Nathan had nodded and offered his congratulations, but Jake had already moved on to the next table before Nathan could finish speaking. That was how most conversations went these days. People felt obligated to acknowledge him, but they never lingered long enough for real conversation. A burst of laughter erupted from the table nearest to him. A group of couples in their 30s were sharing stories about their own weddings and honeymoons. One woman in a bright green dress gestured wildly as she described her wedding day disaster involving a runaway flower girl and a chocolate fountain. Her husband pulled her close and kissed her temple while the others roared with delight. Nathan felt his chest tighten. He had been engaged once before the accident. Rebecca had stayed with him through the initial recovery period, through the physical therapy and the anger and the depression. But after 8 months of hospital visits and medical equipment and the reality that their future would look different than planned, she had quietly returned her engagement ring and moved across the country for a new opportunity. He couldn't blame her. Not really. They had planned to go hiking in Colorado on their honeymoon, to travel the world, to chase adventure together. Those dreams died the same night his legs did, crushed under 2 tons of steel when a drunk driver ran the red light at 5th and Main. The band struck up another slow song, and Nathan watched as more couples moved onto the dance floor. A young father lifted his toddler daughter onto his feet and danced with her tiny hands in his. An elderly man guided his wife of probably 50 years in a gentle circle, her silver dress catching the soft lighting. Even Jake's teenage nephew had worked up the courage to ask a girl in a bright yellow dress to dance, and they swayed awkwardly but happily near the edge of the floor. Nathan's phone buzzed with a text message. His assistant reminding him about a board meeting on Monday morning. Always work, always the next deal, the next acquisition, the next $1 million decision. His company had grown by 40% since the accident, partly because work was the only thing that made him feel useful anymore. But success felt hollow when you had no one to share it with. He had enough money to buy anything he wanted, houses in every city, cars he couldn't drive, vacations he took alone. His penthouse apartment overlooked the entire city, but most nights he sat by the floor-to-ceiling windows feeling like he was looking at life from the outside, pressing his face against the glass but never able to step through. "Excuse me, sir." The voice was soft and warm with just a hint of nervousness. Nathan looked up to see a woman standing beside his table. She was absolutely beautiful, with rich brown skin that seemed to glow in the soft lighting, natural hair pulled back in an elegant updo, and kind eyes that actually met his gaze directly. She wore a deep red dress that hugged her curves perfectly and silver heels that made her about 5 feet 6 inches tall. Beside her stood a little girl who couldn't have been more than 5 years old. The child wore a bright blue dress with white flowers and had her hair done in neat braids with matching blue ribbons. She was looking at Nathan with the open curiosity that only children possessed, her big brown eyes taking in everything about him without judgment. "Yes," Nathan managed to say, his voice rougher than intended. He cleared his throat. The woman's smile grew wider, and Nathan felt something shift in his chest. When was the last time someone had smiled at him like that? Like they were genuinely happy to see him? "I'm so sorry to bother you," she said, her voice carrying a slight southern accent. "My name is Tiana Johnson and this is my daughter Grace. We don't really know anyone here except the bride who I work with at the hospital. I was wondering." She paused, took a deep breath, and looked directly into Nathan's eyes. "Would you mind being my date for the evening?" Nathan blinked, certain he had misheard. I'm sorry, what? Tiana's cheeks flushed slightly, but her smile didn't waver. I know it sounds strange, but Grace and I have been sitting by ourselves all night. Everyone else seems to be paired off or in groups, and you look like you might be flying solo too. I thought maybe we could keep each other company. Grace tugged on her mother's dress. Mommy, can we sit with the nice man? He has the coolest chair I've ever seen. Nathan felt his throat close up. The coolest chair she'd ever seen. Not the saddest thing she'd ever seen, not something to whisper about or avoid. Just a cool chair. Grace, Tiana said gently, remember what we talked about using our inside voice. But Nathan was already smiling, the first real smile he'd had in months. It is a pretty cool chair, he agreed, looking down at Grace. It goes really fast and I can do spins in it. Grace's eyes went wide. Can you show me? Grace, Tiana warned, but Nathan held up his hand. It's okay, he said, then looked up at Tiana. And yes, I would love to be your date for the evening. I'm Nathan Rodriguez. Have you ever wondered what it would be like if someone saw past your limitations and straight to your heart? What if that one person could change everything you thought you knew about yourself? Let me know in the comments if you think Tiana and Nathan are meant to be together, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories like this one. Tiana felt her heart racing as she waited for Nathan's answer. She had been watching him from across the reception hall for the past hour, noticing how isolated he seemed despite being surrounded by people. As a nurse, she had worked with many patients in wheelchairs, and she recognized the look of someone who felt invisible. Are you sure about this? Nathan asked, gesturing to the empty chairs at his table. I have to warn you, I'm not exactly the life of the party these days. Neither am I, Tiana admitted with a laugh. Grace and I were just sitting over there making up stories about the other guests because we didn't have anyone to talk to. Grace had been studying Nathan's wheelchair with fascination. How fast can it go? She asked suddenly. Grace, Tiana said, feeling her cheeks warm with embarrassment. Remember what we talked about, asking personal questions. But Nathan's face lit up with genuine amusement. It can go pretty fast, he told Grace seriously. Faster than you can run, I bet. No way, Grace said, crossing her small arms across her chest. I'm super fast. Mommy says I'm like a cheetah. A cheetah, huh? Nathan grinned. That's impressive. But this chair has motors. Grace's mouth formed a perfect O of amazement. Motors? Like a car? Kind of like a car, Nathan agreed. Want to see? He pressed a button on the armrest of his chair and moved forward a few feet, then spun in a complete circle. Grace clapped her hands and giggled with delight. Tiana felt a warmth spread through her chest. Most adults either ignored Grace completely or spoke to her like she was much younger than her 5 years. But Nathan was talking to her daughter like she was a real person, taking her questions seriously and responding with patience and humor. That was amazing, Grace declared. Can I try it? Grace, you cannot ride in someone else's wheelchair, Tiana said quickly. Actually, Nathan said thoughtfully, if it's okay with your mom, you could sit on my lap and help me drive around the table. But only if she says it's okay. Tiana hesitated. She had always been protective of Grace, maybe too protective. Being a single mother meant constantly worrying about strangers and their intentions. But something about Nathan felt different. Say, please, Mommy? Grace asked, bouncing slightly on her toes. I promise I'll be super careful. All right, Tiana said finally. But just once around the table, and you have to do exactly what Mr. Nathan tells you to do. It's just Nathan, he corrected gently. Mr. Nathan makes me feel old. Grace practically vibrated with excitement as Nathan positioned his chair so she could climb onto his lap safely. He showed her where to put her hands on the controller and explained how the joystick worked. Ready? He asked. Ready? Grace announced with the seriousness of a pilot preparing for takeoff. They moved slowly around the large round table, Grace shrieking with laughter as Nathan let her control the direction. Other guests began to notice, some smiling at the sweet scene, others whispering behind their hands. But Nathan seemed focused entirely on Grace, pointing out the different buttons and explaining what each one did. When they completed their circle and returned to Tiana, Grace was beaming. Mommy, did you see? I was driving. Nathan let me drive. I saw a sweetheart. That was very nice of Nathan to share with you. Grace climbed down carefully and threw her arms around Nathan's neck in an impulsive hug. Thank you, Nathan. You're the nicest grown-up at this whole party. Nathan's expression went soft, and Tiana saw something vulnerable flicker across his features before he smiled. You're pretty nice yourself, Grace. Tiana settled into the chair next to Nathan while Grace examined the different features of his wheelchair with continued fascination. Up close, she could see that Nathan was probably in his early 30s, with warm brown eyes and black hair that was styled perfectly despite the evening's activities. His suit looked expensive but not flashy, and his hands were strong and well cared for. "So," she said, "how do you know Jake and Marie?" "Jake and I are business partners," Nathan explained. "We started our company together about 7 years ago. What about you? You said you work with Marie?" "At Mercy General Hospital. Marie's one of the best surgical nurses I've ever worked with. She's been like a big sister to me since I started there 2 years ago." "Are you a nurse too?" Tiana nodded. "Emergency room. And I'm in school part-time working on my medical degree. It's slow going with Grace and work, but I'm determined to finish." Nathan's eyebrows rose with respect. "That's incredible. Your nursing is demanding enough without adding medical school on top of it. How do you manage everything?" "Lots of coffee and very little sleep," Tiana said with a tired laugh. "But Grace is worth it. I want to be able to give her a better life, and becoming a doctor will help me do that." Grace had moved to examine the wheels of Nathan's chair, running her small fingers along the spokes. "Nathan, why do you need this chair?" she asked with the directness that only children possessed. Tiana's heart stopped. "Grace, that's not polite to ask." "It's okay," Nathan said quietly. He looked down at Grace, who was waiting patiently for his answer. "I was in a car accident a few years ago and it hurt my legs. They don't work the same way they used to, so I use this chair to get around instead." "Does it hurt?" Grace asked. "Not anymore. Not usually." "That's good," Grace said matter-of-factly. "Mommy says when things hurt, it means our bodies are trying to get better. Maybe your legs will get better too." Nathan's smile was gentle but sad. "Maybe they will, Grace." Tiana felt her throat tighten at the exchange. Grace's innocent optimism and Nathan's patient response to her questions revealed something beautiful about both of them. Her daughter had never been afraid of differences, but not all adults handled her curiosity with such grace. "Grace, why don't you come sit down so Nathan and I can talk?" Tiana suggested. Grace climbed into the chair next to Nathan, swinging her legs because her feet didn't quite touch the floor. "Can we get some cake soon? I saw them cutting it and it looks really good." "Of course," Nathan said. "Would you like me to go get us some?" "I can get it," Tiana offered, starting to stand. "Please," Nathan said, his voice carrying a note she couldn't quite identify. "Let me. I don't get to do things for people very often anymore." Tiana settled back into her chair, understanding somehow that this was important to him. "That would be lovely. Thank you." As Nathan maneuvered his chair toward the dessert table, Grace watched him go with obvious admiration. "Mommy, I like Nathan," she declared. "He's nice and he talks to me like I'm big." "He does seem very nice," Tiana agreed, watching Nathan navigate through the crowd with practiced ease. Several people stepped aside to let him pass, but she noticed how few of them actually acknowledged him with eye contact or conversation. "Are we going to see him again after tonight?" Grace asked. Tiana's heart skipped. She hadn't thought that far ahead. The evening had started as a desperate attempt to avoid sitting alone at a wedding where she barely knew anyone, but it was turning into something more complicated. Something that made her feel hopeful and nervous at the same time. "I don't know, sweetheart. We'll see." But as she watched Nathan returning with 3 plates of cake, taking care to balance them while maneuvering his chair through the crowd, Tiana found herself hoping the answer would be yes. Nathan returned to the table with 3 generous slices of the wedding cake, each plate balanced carefully on a small tray he had requested from the catering staff. The cake was a beautiful 3-layer creation with vanilla buttercream frosting and fresh strawberries, and Grace's eyes lit up when she saw it. "This looks amazing," Tiana said, accepting her plate with gratitude. "Thank you so much for getting this for us." "Thank you, Nathan," Grace echoed, already digging into her slice with the enthusiasm only a 5-year-old could muster. Nathan felt something warm and unfamiliar settle in his chest as he watched them enjoy the cake. When was the last time he had done something as simple as bringing dessert to friends? When was the last time someone had thanked him for such a small gesture with such genuine appreciation? "So tell me about your company," Tiana said, taking a delicate bite of cake. "What kind of business are you in?" "We develop medical technology," Nathan explained. "Specifically devices that help people with mobility challenges live more independently. Prosthetics, adaptive equipment, smart home systems, that kind of thing." Tiana's eyes widened with interest. "That's incredible. So you're literally helping people improve their lives every day." "We try to," Nathan said modestly. It started as a personal interest after my accident. I got frustrated with how clunky and outdated most adaptive equipment was, so Jake and I decided to see if we could do better. That's amazing. You took something difficult that happened to you and turned it into a way to help other people. Tiana's voice carried genuine admiration. That takes real strength. Nathan felt his cheeks warm. He wasn't used to people seeing his work as inspirational rather than just business. Jake does most of the engineering. I handle the business side of things. Nathan, Grace said suddenly, frosting decorating the corners of her mouth, do you make legs for people who don't have them? Grace, Tiana warned gently. No, it's a great question, Nathan said. We do work on prosthetic limbs. We're actually developing a new kind of artificial leg that can be controlled by thinking about it, kind of like how you think about moving your real leg. Grace's fork paused halfway to her mouth. You can think a fake leg into moving? Well, it's complicated, but sort of. The brain sends signals to muscles, and we figured out how to capture some of those signals and translate them into movement for artificial limbs. That's like magic, Grace breathed. Nathan laughed, a real laugh that came from deep in his chest. It does seem like magic sometimes. Science can be pretty amazing. Grace loves science, Tiana said proudly. She's always asking me how things work and I have to look up half the answers. What's your favorite science thing, Grace? Nathan asked. Grace considered this very seriously while chewing her cake. I like animals and how they work. Like how birds fly and how fish breathe underwater and why cats always land on their feet. Those are excellent things to wonder about, Nathan said. Do you know that engineers study animals all the time to figure out how to make better machines? Like studying birds to make better airplanes or studying dolphins to make better submarines. Really? Grace's eyes were wide with fascination. Really? It's called biomimicry. Bio means life and mimicry means copying. So biomimicry means copying life to make technology. Tiana watched this exchange with growing amazement. Nathan was talking to Grace like she was capable of understanding complex concepts, but he was explaining them in ways that made sense to a 5-year-old mind. As a single mother, she was used to carrying all the responsibility for enriching Grace's curious mind. Having someone else share that load even for one evening felt like a gift. The band transitioned to a more upbeat song, and several children ran onto the dance floor, including some kids around Grace's age. Mommy, can I go dance? Grace asked. Tiana looked toward the dance floor, calculating distances and potential hazards the way she always did. Stay where I can see you, and if any adults try to talk to you, you come right back here, okay? Okay, Grace agreed, already climbing down from her chair. She paused and looked at Nathan. Do you want to come dance with me? Nathan's expression went carefully neutral. I don't really dance anymore, Grace. But you go have fun and we'll watch you. But you could still dance, Grace said with 5-year-old logic. Your chair moves and spins. That's like dancing. Before Nathan could respond, Grace had bounded toward the dance floor, her blue dress flowing behind her like water. Tiana saw the longing that flashed across Nathan's face before he could hide it. She's right, you know, she said quietly. Dancing doesn't have to look like everyone else's version of dancing. I used to love to dance, Nathan admitted, watching Grace twirl happily among the other children. Rebecca and my ex-fiancée and I used to go dancing every Friday night. There was this little jazz club downtown that had live music and a tiny dance floor. We probably looked terrible, but we didn't care. What happened to her? Tiana asked gently. Nathan was quiet for so long that Tiana thought he might not answer. Finally he said, she couldn't handle the new reality. I don't blame her. Our whole future together changed in one night, and she was 26 years old. She had every right to want the life she originally signed up for. Did you love her? I thought I did. But looking back, I think I was in love with the idea of her, with the life we had planned together. I'm not sure I really knew who she was underneath all those plans. Nathan paused, then looked directly at Tiana. What about Grace's father? Tiana's jaw tightened slightly. He left when Grace was 6 months old. Said he wasn't ready to be a father, that he felt trapped. I haven't heard from him since. His loss, Nathan said simply. That's what I tell Grace when she asks about him. She's starting to notice that other kids have dads, and I know it's going to get harder to explain as she gets older. For what it's worth, you're doing an incredible job with her. She's smart, curious, polite, brave, all the things that matter. Tiana felt tears prick her eyes unexpectedly. Thank you. That means more than you know. Some days I feel like I'm failing at everything. I doubt that's true. They watched Grace on the dance floor, spinning and laughing with the other children. She caught sight of them watching and waved enthusiastically, nearly tripping over her own feet in the process. "She's fearless," Nathan observed. "Sometimes too fearless," Tiana said with a mother's worry. "She talks to everyone, asks a million questions, assumes everyone wants to be her friend. I worry that the world is going to crush that optimism eventually. Or maybe she'll change the world instead," Nathan suggested. "Maybe people like Grace are exactly what the world needs more of." Tiana looked at him thoughtfully. "Is that what you're trying to do with your company? Change the world?" "I'm trying to change small pieces of it," Nathan said. "One adaptive device at a time, one person's independence at a time. It's not world-changing, but it matters to the people we help." "I think that's exactly world-changing," Tiana said firmly. "You're giving people their lives back." Nathan felt something shift inside him, like a door opening after being locked for years. Here was this incredible woman, this devoted mother, seeing him as someone who mattered, someone who contributed something valuable to the world. When was the last time someone had seen him that way? Grace came running back to the table, slightly out of breath and glowing with happiness. "Did you see me dancing? I did the twisty thing and the jumping thing." "We saw everything," Tiana assured her. "You were amazing." "Nathan, are you sure you don't want to try dancing? I could teach you some moves." Nathan looked at Grace's hopeful face, then at Tiana's encouraging smile. For the first time in 5 years he felt brave enough to try something that scared him. "You know what, Grace? Maybe just one song." The dance floor felt different from Nathan's wheelchair perspective. The music was louder down here, the bass thrumming through his chest, and the lights seemed brighter, casting colorful patterns across the polished marble floor. Grace had appointed herself as dance instructor and was demonstrating various moves with the seriousness of a professional choreographer. "Okay, so first you do this," she said, raising her arms above her head and swaying back and forth. "It's called the tree dance because you move like branches in the wind." Nathan raised his arms and mimicked her swaying motion while gently rocking his wheelchair side to side. Several other guests had noticed their unconventional dance partnership, but instead of stares or whispers, he saw smiles and nods of approval. "That's perfect," Grace declared. "Now you try the spin move." Nathan executed a smooth turn in his chair, and Grace clapped with delight. "You're really good at this, Nathan." "I have a good teacher," he replied, meaning it completely. Tiana approached them on the dance floor, moving to the rhythm of the music. She wore her confidence like the most beautiful accessory, her red dress flowing around her as she danced. When she reached them, she held out her hands to Grace. "Mind if I cut in?" she asked with a playful smile. "Mommy, you have to see Nathan's spin move," Grace said, but she took her mother's hands and began dancing with her. Nathan watched them together, mother and daughter moving in perfect harmony. Tiana's love for Grace was evident in every glance, every protective gesture, every encouraging word. But what struck him most was how natural Tiana looked, including him in their circle, never making him feel like an outsider or an obligation. The song shifted to something slower, and couples around them moved closer together. Grace immediately adapted, taking slower, more deliberate steps. "This is the princess dance," she informed them. "You have to move like you're wearing a big fancy dress." Nathan had to laugh at her logic, but he slowed his movements to match hers. Tiana caught his eye over Grace's head and smiled, and Nathan felt that same warm sensation in his chest he'd been experiencing all evening. When the song ended, Grace was ready for a break. They made their way back to their table, and Nathan was surprised to find that he felt energized rather than self-conscious about his time on the dance floor. "That was wonderful," Tiana said as they settled back into their seats. "Thank you for dancing with us." "Thank you for asking me to," Nathan replied. "I honestly didn't think I'd ever dance again." "Why not?" Grace asked, ever direct. "I guess I thought people would stare, or that I wouldn't be able to keep up, or that I'd look silly." Grace considered this with the seriousness she applied to all important matters. "But everyone looks silly when they dance," she said finally. "That's what makes it fun." Nathan and Tiana exchanged a look of shared amusement and admiration for Grace's 5-year-old wisdom. "She has a point," Tiana said. "Some of the best dancing I've ever seen has looked absolutely ridiculous." "Tell me about the silliest dancing you've ever done," Nathan said, genuinely curious. Tiana's cheeks flushed slightly. "Oh goodness. When I was in nursing school, my roommate and I used to have these study breaks where we'd put on music and dance around our tiny apartment to relieve stress. One night we were so exhausted and punchy that we spent an hour doing what we called interpretive dancing, to medical terminology. I did a whole interpretive dance for gastroenteritis. That was truly horrible." Nathan was laughing so hard he had to wipe tears from his eyes. I would pay money to see that. You would not, Tiana protested, but she was laughing too. What's gastroenter whatever? Grace asked. It's a fancy way of saying stomachache, Tiana explained. Can you show me the dance? Absolutely not, Tiana said firmly, but her eyes were sparkling with mirth. Nathan felt like he was experiencing something completely new. This easy laughter, this comfortable conversation, this feeling of being included and valued for exactly who he was right now, not who he used to be or who he might become. It was like discovering he'd been holding his breath for 5 years and could finally exhale. What about you? Tiana asked him. What's the silliest thing you've ever done? Nathan thought for a moment. In college, Jake and I entered a dance competition at this club near campus. We had no business being there, but we were convinced we could win the $100 prize. We practiced for weeks, learned this elaborate routine to a hip-hop song. We were absolutely terrible, but we were so confident. Did you win? Grace asked. We came in dead last, Nathan admitted. But we had so much fun that we didn't care. We kept going back to that club every weekend just to dance badly and laugh about it. I wish I could have seen that, Tiana said wistfully. Jake probably still has the video somewhere. We made his girlfriend film it because we thought we were going to be famous. They talked easily for another hour, sharing stories and discovering common interests. Nathan learned that Tiana loved old movies and made the best chocolate chip cookies in her apartment building. Tiana learned that Nathan played piano and had a secret addiction to reality TV shows that he watched while working late at night. Grace contributed her own observations and questions, keeping them all entertained with her unique perspective on the world. She was fascinated by Nathan's descriptions of his work and asked if she could visit his office sometime to see the thinking legs he was developing. If your mom says it's okay, I'd love to show you around, Nathan said, then looked at Tiana. We have a whole demonstration lab where people can try different devices and see how they work. It's actually pretty kid-friendly. Tiana hesitated for just a moment, the protective instinct she'd honed as a single mother making her weigh the offer carefully. But then she saw the hope in Nathan's eyes and the excitement on Grace's face, and she realized she didn't want this evening to be their only time together. That sounds educational and fun, she said. If you're serious about the offer, Grace would love it. I'm completely serious, Nathan assured her. What are you doing next Saturday? We usually go to the park in the morning, then grocery shopping, Tiana said. Pretty exciting stuff. The park sounds great too. Mind if I join you? Grace bounced in her seat. Can he come to our park, Mommy? Please? Tiana looked at Nathan, this man who had somehow turned an awkward wedding reception into one of the most enjoyable evenings she'd had in years. Are you sure you want to spend your Saturday morning chasing a 5-year-old around a playground? Nathan's smile was the most genuine expression she'd seen from him all evening. I can't think of anything I'd rather do. As the wedding reception began winding down around them, Tiana realized that this unexpected evening had shifted something fundamental in her world. For 2 years she had focused entirely on Grace and her studies and her work, convinced that there wasn't room in her life for anything else. But sitting here with Nathan, watching him interact with her daughter with such patience and kindness, she began to wonder if maybe there was room for more after all. Could someone like her really be the answer to your loneliness? What do you think will happen when Nathan meets them at the park? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to follow this heartwarming journey. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp spring air that made everything feel possible. Tiana had changed her outfit 3 times, finally settling on dark jeans and a bright green sweater that Grace had declared perfect for park adventures. She told herself she wasn't nervous about seeing Nathan again, but the butterflies in her stomach suggested otherwise. Grace had been awake since sunrise, chattering excitedly about showing Nathan her favorite climbing structure and the duck pond where they sometimes brought breadcrumbs. She wore her favorite red overalls and had insisted on braiding her hair herself, resulting in a slightly lopsided but charming hairstyle. Is Nathan going to be there when we get there? Grace asked for the 15th time as they walked the 3 blocks to Riverside Park. He said he'd meet us by the main entrance at 10 o'clock, Tiana replied patiently. What if he can't find us? Then we'll find him. Don't worry, sweetheart. But as they approached the park entrance, Tiana felt her own worry creeping in. What if Nathan had reconsidered? What if the magic of the wedding reception couldn't survive the harsh light of day? What if he had woken up this morning and realized that spending time with a single mother and her energetic 5-year-old wasn't actually how he wanted to spend his weekend? Her concerns evaporated the moment she saw Nathan waiting exactly where he had promised to be. He wore casual clothes, dark jeans and a blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and his face lit up when he spotted them approaching. "Nathan," Grace called out, breaking into a run. "You came, you really came." "Of course I came," Nathan said, catching Grace in a gentle hug as she reached him. "I promised, didn't I?" "Some grown-ups promise things and then don't do them," Grace said with the matter-of-fact wisdom that sometimes broke Tiana's heart. "Well, I'm not one of those grown-ups," Nathan said seriously. "When I make a promise to you, Grace, I keep it." Tiana felt something tight in her chest loosen as she watched this exchange. Nathan understood that his words carried weight with Grace, that her trust was something to be treasured and protected. "Good morning," Nathan said as Tiana reached them. "Beautiful day for the park." "It really is," Tiana agreed. "Thanks for coming. I hope you're ready for the full Grace experience." "I can't wait," Nathan said, and Tiana could tell he meant it. Grace immediately took charge of the tour, leading them down the main path while providing detailed commentary about every feature of the park. She showed Nathan the best swings, the climbing structure that looked like a castle, and the little garden where butterflies liked to gather on warm afternoons. "And over there is the duck pond," Grace said, pointing to a small body of water surrounded by willow trees. "Sometimes we bring bread, but Mommy says we have to use the special duck bread from the store because regular bread makes them sick." "That's very thoughtful of your mom," Nathan said. "Ducks have sensitive stomachs." "Did you know that ducks can sleep with one eye open?" Grace asked. "I didn't know that. That's amazing." Tiana smiled as she listened to their conversation. Nathan had a gift for taking Grace's questions and observations seriously, responding with genuine interest rather than the patronizing tone many adults used with children. They spent an hour at the playground with Grace demonstrating her climbing skills and Nathan cheering her on from below. When she reached the top of the tallest slide, she called down, "Nathan, are you watching?" "I'm watching," he assured her. "You're incredibly brave." Grace slid down with a whoop of joy, then ran back to climb again. After several trips up and down, she flopped onto the grass beside Nathan's chair, slightly out of breath. "I'm thirsty," she announced. "There's a snack bar by the tennis courts," Tiana said. "We could get drinks and maybe some lunch." "That sounds perfect," Nathan agreed. "My treat." "You don't have to." Tiana started to protest. "Please," Nathan said, and there was that note in his voice again, the one that suggested this was important to him. "I'd like to." The snack bar was busy with Saturday morning families, and they had to wait in line behind several other parents with children. Grace entertained herself by counting how many different colors she could see in people's clothing, while Nathan and Tiana stood comfortably together, occasionally commenting on Grace's observations. 17 different colors so far, Grace announced. "Not counting the boring ones like black and white and brown." "What makes those colors boring?" Nathan asked. "They're not bright and happy," Grace explained. "Happy colors are like red and yellow and purple and green. Like Mommy's sweater." Nathan glanced at Tiana's green sweater and smiled. "I think you're right about happy colors." When they reached the front of the line, Nathan ordered sandwiches and drinks for all of them, plus ice cream for Grace. They found a table under a large oak tree, and Grace chattered happily about her morning adventures while they ate. "Nathan," she said around a bite of grilled cheese, "do you have kids?" "Grace," Tiana warned, but Nathan held up a hand. "It's okay," he said. "No, Grace, I don't have children." "Why not?" "Grace, that's enough questions." "No, really, it's fine," Nathan said. He looked at Grace thoughtfully. "I guess I haven't found the right person to have children with yet." "What kind of person would be right?" Grace asked. Nathan glanced at Tiana, then back at Grace. "Someone kind and smart and funny. Someone who would be a good mom like yours is." Grace considered this seriously. "Mommy is the best mom in the whole world." "I can see that," Nathan said softly. After lunch, they walked to the duck pond where Grace delighted in pointing out the different types of waterfowl and making up names for the ones she recognized from previous visits. There was Harold the mallard, who was missing some tail feathers, and Penelope the goose, who was particularly bold about approaching people for food. "We didn't bring duck bread today," Grace said sadly. "Sorry, Harold." "Maybe next time," Nathan suggested. "We could make it a regular thing, coming to visit Harold and Penelope." Grace's face lit up. "Really? You want to come back to our park?" "If that's okay with you and your mom, I'd love to." Grace looked at Tiana expectantly. "Can he, Mommy? Can Nathan be our park friend?" Tiana felt her heart skip. "If Nathan wants to spend more time with us, I think that would be wonderful." "I do want that," Nathan said, holding her gaze. "Very much." They stayed at the park until early afternoon, with Grace showing no signs of slowing down despite having been active for hours. Nathan seemed equally energetic, engaging with every game and story and question Grace presented. As they finally prepared to leave, Grace took Nathan's hand in her small one. "This was the best park day ever," she declared. "For me too," Nathan said, and Tiana could see that he meant it completely. "Nathan," Tiana said as they walked toward the park exit, "would you like to come to dinner tomorrow night? Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and garlic bread. Grace makes the best salad in the city." "It's true," Grace added. "I put cucumbers and tomatoes and everything." Nathan stopped his chair and looked at both of them. "You want me to come to your home for dinner?" "Only if you want to," Tiana said quickly. "I know you probably have much more exciting things to do." "Tiana," Nathan said quietly, "I can't think of anything I'd rather do than have dinner with you and Grace." As they exchanged phone numbers and made plans for the following evening, Tiana felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not just the general hope that things would work out okay, but specific hope. Hope that this wonderful man who treated her daughter like she was precious might want to be part of their lives. Hope that she might not have to do everything alone anymore. Hope that maybe, just maybe, her small family might be about to grow. Sunday evening arrived with the warm smell of garlic and herbs filling Tiana's small apartment. She had spent the afternoon preparing what she privately thought of as her signature meal, the kind of comfort food that made people feel welcome and at home. Grace had helped by carefully arranging cucumber and tomato slices in her special salad pattern, and now she was setting the table with her most serious concentration face. "Should I put Nathan's napkin on the left or the right?" Grace asked, holding up a bright yellow cloth napkin. "Left is perfect," Tiana said, checking the sauce one more time. "Remember, when Nathan gets here, you wait for Mommy to answer the door, okay?" "I remember," Grace said, but Tiana could see her daughter practically vibrating with excitement. The apartment was small but warm, with soft lighting and colorful artwork that Grace had created over the years. Tiana had worried that it might seem cramped or humble to someone like Nathan, who probably lived in a penthouse somewhere, but she had pushed those thoughts aside. This was their home, and it was filled with love even if it wasn't filled with expensive furniture. When the doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock, Grace jumped up from the couch where she had been pretending to read a book. He's here," she whispered excitedly. Tiana opened the door to find Nathan holding a bottle of wine and a small bouquet of flowers. He looked handsome in casual clothes, khakis and a maroon sweater that brought out the warmth in his brown eyes. "These are for you," he said, offering the flowers. "And Grace mentioned she likes books, so I brought her something too." He handed Grace a wrapped package and she looked up at her mother for permission before accepting it. "Go ahead and open it, sweetheart," Tiana said. Grace carefully unwrapped the gift to reveal a beautiful picture book about animals and their unique abilities. Her eyes went wide as she flipped through the colorful illustrations. "It's about biomimicry," Nathan explained. "Remember what we talked about at the wedding? How engineers study animals to make better technology. This is the best book ever," Grace declared, hugging it to her chest. "Thank you, Nathan." "You're very welcome." Tiana felt a familiar warmth spread through her chest. Nathan had listened to Grace, really listened, and had chosen a gift that connected to her interests. It was the kind of thoughtfulness that meant more than any expensive present could have. "Something smells incredible," Nathan said as Tiana led him into the small living area that flowed into the kitchen. "Just spaghetti and garlic bread," Tiana said modestly. "Nothing fancy." "It's not just spaghetti," Grace corrected seriously. "It's Mommy's special sauce with 3 different kinds of herbs and Parmesan cheese that we grate ourselves." Nathan smiled. "That sounds much more sophisticated than just spaghetti." The apartment was designed with an open floor plan that made it feel larger than it actually was, but Tiana still found herself watching Nathan navigate the space, hoping it was accessible enough for his chair. He moved through it easily and she realized she had been worrying for nothing. "Can I show Nathan my room?" Grace asked. "After dinner, sweetheart. Let's eat while everything is hot." They settled around the small dining table, with Grace chattering about her day and asking Nathan questions about his work. The conversation flowed as easily as it had at the park, with Nathan showing genuine interest in Grace's observations about everything from the weather to the neighbor's cat who liked to sit on their fire escape. "Nathan," Grace said as she carefully twirled spaghetti around her fork, "how did you learn to make those thinking legs?" "Well, I didn't actually make them myself," Nathan explained. "I work with engineers and doctors and computer scientists who are much smarter than me. My job is to help them figure out what people need and how to make it affordable for everyone." "But you had the idea?" I had some ideas, but the best ideas come from listening to people who actually need the devices. They know better than anyone what would make their lives easier. Tiana was struck again by Nathan's humility. He could have bragged about his success or his wealth, but instead he consistently redirected credit to others. Tell me about your work at the hospital, Nathan said to Tiana. What's it like in the emergency room? Busy, intense, never boring, Tiana said. Every day is different. Some days it's mostly routine things like cuts and bruises and stomach bugs. Other days. She paused, glancing at Grace, who was absorbed in getting the perfect amount of sauce on her bread. Other days are harder, Nathan said, understanding. Other days remind me why I want to be a doctor, Tiana said. I want to be able to do more than just comfort people and follow orders. I want to be the one making the medical decisions that help people get better. How much longer until you finish medical school? If everything goes according to plan, 3 more years. Then residency, which will be another 3 or 4 years depending on what specialty I choose. Nathan's eyebrows rose. That's a long time to balance work and school and being a full-time mom. Some people think I'm crazy for attempting it, Tiana admitted. My mom thinks I should just be satisfied with nursing. She worries that I'm trying to do too much and that Grace will suffer for it. What do you think? Tiana looked at her daughter, who was now making elaborate patterns with her remaining spaghetti. I think Grace benefits from seeing her mother work hard for her dreams. I want her to know that she can accomplish anything she sets her mind to, regardless of where she started or what obstacles she faces. That's beautiful, Nathan said quietly. After dinner, Grace insisted on showing Nathan her bedroom, which was decorated in bright blues and greens with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. She proudly displayed her collection of science books and the microscope that Tiana had bought her for her 5th birthday. Mommy lets me look at pond water and leaves and things, Grace explained, demonstrating how to adjust the focus. Did you know that leaves have tiny holes that you can't see without a microscope? Stomata, Nathan said. Those holes help the leaves breathe. Grace's eyes went wide. You know about the breathing holes? I took a lot of science classes in college. Plants are pretty amazing. They spent another hour looking at Grace's various collections and projects, with Nathan asking thoughtful questions and offering explanations that satisfied Grace's curiosity without being too complex for her to understand. When it was time for Grace's bath and bedtime routine, Nathan prepared to leave, but Grace had other ideas. Can't Nathan read me a story tonight? She asked. Please? Tiana looked at Nathan uncertainly. You don't have to. I'd love to, Nathan said. If you don't mind. 20 minutes later, Grace was in her pajamas and settled into bed with her new biomimicry book. Nathan positioned his chair beside her bed and read in a warm, animated voice that brought the animal stories to life. Grace was asleep before he finished the chapter about dolphins and echolocation. Tiana stood in the doorway watching this scene, her heart full of emotions she wasn't quite ready to name. Nathan read to Grace like it was the most natural thing in the world, like he belonged in this moment, in this room, in their lives. After they quietly left Grace's room, Tiana made tea and they settled in the living room. The apartment felt different with Nathan in it, smaller but also more complete somehow. Thank you for tonight, Nathan said. For dinner, for including me in your home, for letting me read to Grace. It's been perfect. Thank you for the flowers and the book and for being so wonderful with Grace, Tiana replied. She adores you already. The feeling is mutual. Nathan paused, then looked directly at Tiana. I need to tell you something. Before my accident, I thought I knew what I wanted from life. Success, money, a wife who looked good at business dinners, kids who would go to the right schools and follow the path I laid out for them. It was all very neat and predictable. Tiana waited for him to continue, sensing this was important. After the accident, I thought all of that was impossible. Not just the neat and predictable part but the family part too. I convinced myself that I was too broken, too complicated, too much work for anyone to take on. Nathan. Let me finish, he said gently. Being with you and Grace these past few days, I realize how wrong I was. Not about being complicated because I am that. But about what makes a family, about what makes a life worth living. It's not the neat and predictable stuff. It's Grace falling asleep to stories about dolphins. It's you working 3 jobs to chase your dreams while raising the most amazing little girl I've ever met. It's Sunday night spaghetti and feeling like I belong somewhere. Tiana felt tears prick her eyes. You do belong here, Nathan. With us. Do you really mean that? Instead of answering with words, Tiana reached across the small space between them and took his hand. I mean it completely. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Nathan had rearranged his schedule to spend Wednesday evenings and weekends with Tiana and Grace, and what had started as planned activities had evolved into something that felt remarkably like family life. Wednesday evenings were homework nights, with Nathan helping Grace with her kindergarten reading practice while Tiana studied for her medical school exams at the kitchen table. Grace had decided that Nathan was an excellent reading partner because he did different voices for all the characters and never got impatient when she struggled with difficult words. "Sound it out, Grace," Nathan would say gently. "What letter does it start with?" "B," Grace would say, pointing at the word butterfly, with her small finger. "Good. And what sound does B make?" "But," Grace would say, then work through the rest of the letters until she triumphantly announced, "Butterfly." "Perfect. You're getting so good at this." Tiana would look up from her textbooks to see Grace beaming with pride at Nathan's praise, and her heart would do that little flip that was becoming more familiar each day. Saturdays had become adventure days. Nathan had taken them to the Science Museum, where Grace spent 3 hours exploring the hands-on exhibits while Nathan patiently answered her endless questions about everything from dinosaur bones to space exploration. He had shown them his office building, giving Grace a tour of the research lab and letting her try some of the adaptive devices they were developing. "This is so cool," Grace had declared, maneuvering a practice wheelchair around the lab with Nathan's coaching. "It's like driving a car." "That's exactly what it's like," Nathan had agreed. "Some people need cars for their legs." The lab technicians had been charmed by Grace's enthusiasm and had shown her some of the prosthetic limbs they were working on. Grace had been fascinated by the computerized hand that could pick up objects and had spent 20 minutes making it wave at her. "We're helping people do all the things they want to do," Nathan had explained. "Like your mom helping sick people get better at the hospital." "So you and Mommy both have helper jobs," Grace had said with satisfaction. "That's right. We both have helper jobs." Sundays had become cooking days. Nathan had confessed that he lived mostly on takeout and frozen dinners, so Tiana had taken it upon herself to teach him some basic recipes. Grace appointed herself the assistant chef and took her responsibilities very seriously. "Nathan, you have to stir the sauce clockwise," Grace instructed from her perch on the kitchen counter. "That's the way Mommy does it." "Clockwise it is," Nathan said solemnly, adjusting his stirring technique. "Why does the direction matter?" he asked Tiana quietly. "It doesn't," Tiana whispered back with a smile. "But Grace thinks it does, so we go with it." These domestic moments were the ones that surprised Nathan the most. He had always imagined that family life would feel restrictive, full of obligations and schedules and compromises. Instead, he found himself looking forward to Wednesday evenings and weekend adventures more than any business meeting or social event he had ever attended. One Saturday afternoon, as they sat in Riverside Park watching Grace feed the ducks with approved duck bread, Tiana broached a subject that had been on her mind. "Nathan," she said carefully, "Grace has been asking me some questions." "What kind of questions?" "About whether you're going to stay in our lives. About whether you might be her dad someday." Nathan felt his chest tighten. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that caring about someone doesn't come with guarantees, but that you care about both of us very much and that's what matters right now." "That's a good answer," Nathan said, watching Grace toss breadcrumbs to Harold the mallard. "Is it accurate?" Tiana asked quietly. Nathan turned to look at her directly. "The caring part is absolutely accurate. I care about you and Grace more than I knew was possible." "And the staying part?" "Tiana, I want to stay. I want to be part of your lives in whatever way you'll have me. But I also want to be realistic about what that means. I'm complicated. My life isn't simple. There are things about my situation that might affect Grace as she gets older." "What kind of things?" Nathan was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Kids can be cruel about differences. If Grace tells her classmates that her mom's boyfriend or stepfather uses a wheelchair, there might be comments or questions that are hard for a child to handle." Tiana felt a flash of protective anger. "Then those children need better parenting and education." "I agree, but that doesn't make it easier for Grace if it happens." "Nathan, look at me." He met her eyes and she saw vulnerability there that made her want to hold him close. "Grace has spent her entire life being different," Tiana said firmly. "She's the only kid in her class being raised by a single mom. She's one of only 3 black children in her school. She's never had a father figure and kids have already asked her about that. Different is not new for Grace." "That's not the same thing." "You're right, it's not the same thing. It's better. Grace would be proud to tell people about you." "Do you know what she told her teacher when Mrs. Patterson asked what she did over the weekend?" Nathan shook his head. "She said, 'I went to the Science Museum with my mom and Nathan, and Nathan knows everything about how animals help people invent things. Then she spent 10 minutes explaining biomimicry to the entire class. Nathan felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. She doesn't see your wheelchair as something to be ashamed of, Tiana continued. She sees it as part of what makes you interesting. And frankly, so do I. Grace came running back to them, having distributed all the duck bread to her satisfaction. Harold ate the most, she reported. But Penelope got some too, so it's fair. That's very thoughtful of you to make sure everyone got some, Nathan said. Grace climbed onto the bench next to Nathan and leaned against his arm with the casual affection that had developed between them over the past weeks. Nathan, she said, are you going to come to my school play next month? You're in a school play? Nathan asked with delight. What play? We're doing The Three Little Pigs, and I'm the third little pig. The smart one who builds the brick house. Perfect casting, Nathan said seriously. You're definitely smart enough to outwit any wolf. So will you come? Mommy's coming and Grandma Johnson is coming, and I want you to come too. Nathan looked at Tiana, who nodded encouragingly. I wouldn't miss it for anything, Nathan said. I'll be in the front row cheering for the smartest little pig in the whole play. Grace beamed and snuggled closer to Nathan's side. This is the best day ever, she declared. As they walked home from the park, with Grace skipping ahead and pointing out interesting flowers and dogs and cloud shapes, Tiana felt a deep sense of contentment settle over her. For 3 years she had been the sole architect of their small family's happiness. Now suddenly she had a partner in that effort. Someone who celebrated Grace's victories and worried about her challenges and wanted to be present for all the ordinary moments that made up their life. That evening, as Nathan read Grace her bedtime story, Tiana stood in the doorway and allowed herself to imagine a future where this wasn't temporary. Where Nathan's voice reading fairy tales was a permanent soundtrack to their evenings. Where his laughter in their kitchen and his presence at Grace's school events and his gentle encouragement of Grace's dreams were just part of their normal, everyday life. For the first time since Grace's father had walked away, Tiana allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to do everything alone anymore. Nathan's phone had been ringing constantly for 3 days, and each call brought worse news than the last. He sat in his office on Tuesday morning, staring at the financial reports spread across his desk while his assistant Laura briefed him on the latest developments. Morrison Industries made another offer to TechMed Solutions, Laura said, her voice tight with concern. 20% above market value, plus guaranteed job security for all their current employees. Nathan rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building behind his eyes. TechMed Solutions was Rodriguez and Associates' largest client, accounting for nearly 30% of their annual revenue. Losing them would be devastating, but the offer Morrison Industries was making would be almost impossible for TechMed to refuse. What's our counteroffer? Nathan asked, though he already knew the answer. We can't match it, Laura said quietly. Morrison has deeper pockets than we do, and they're clearly willing to take a loss on this partnership just to hurt us. Nathan's jaw tightened. Morrison Industries was the kind of massive corporation that specialized in buying out smaller competitors and either absorbing them or shutting them down entirely. They had been circling Rodriguez and Associates for 2 years, making increasingly aggressive moves to undermine Nathan's business. Schedule a meeting with the TechMed board for Thursday, Nathan said. I want to make our case in person. Nathan, Laura said hesitantly, maybe it's time to consider Morrison's buyout offer. The terms aren't terrible and you'd walk away with enough money to... To what? Nathan interrupted. Retire at 32 and spend the rest of my life knowing I gave up on everything Jake and I built together? Laura was quiet for a moment. Nathan knew she was thinking about practical things like employee salaries and health insurance and the dozen other companies that depended on Rodriguez and Associates for contracts and partnerships. I'm not giving up, Nathan said firmly. Not yet. But as Laura left his office and Nathan returned to the financial projections, he felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. 43 people worked for Rodriguez and Associates. They had mortgages and car payments and children's college funds that depended on Nathan making the right decisions. Jake had trusted him to handle the business side of their partnership, and now Nathan was facing the possibility of losing everything they had worked for. His phone buzzed with a text from Tiana. Grace drew you a picture of Harold the duck. Can't wait to show you tonight. Nathan smiled despite his stress. Tonight was Wednesday, which meant homework help with Grace and quiet studying time with Tiana. It was the one bright spot in what was shaping up to be a terrible week. But as the afternoon wore on, the crisis deepened. TechMed's CEO called personally to inform Nathan that they would be making their final decision by Friday morning. Two other clients called to express concern about Rodriguez and Associates' financial stability, hinting that they might need to reconsider their partnerships if the company's future was uncertain. By 5 o'clock, Nathan was running on coffee and stress, and he realized with a sinking heart that he was going to have to cancel dinner with Tiana and Grace. There was simply too much work to do, too many phone calls to make, too many last-ditch strategies to explore. He called Tiana's cell phone, hoping to catch her before she left work. "Hey," she said, her voice warm and happy. "I was just thinking about you. Grace has been talking about showing you her duck picture all day. Tiana, I'm so sorry but I have to cancel tonight. There's a crisis at work and I need to." "Oh." The disappointment in her voice was obvious, though she tried to hide it. "Is everything okay? It's complicated business stuff. I might lose a major client, and I have to work late to try to save the partnership." "Of course," Tiana said quickly. "Work has to come first. Grace will understand." But Nathan could hear the hurt underneath her understanding tone, and his chest tightened with guilt. He had made a promise to be reliable, to be present, and he was already breaking that promise. "I'll make it up to you both this weekend," he said. "Maybe we can go to that butterfly conservatory Grace has been talking about." "That sounds nice," Tiana said, but her enthusiasm was forced. "Good luck with everything tonight." After she hung up, Nathan sat in his empty office feeling like he was failing at everything that mattered. The business crisis was threatening his livelihood and the livelihoods of everyone who worked for him. And now he was disappointing the two people who had become the most important part of his life. He called for Chinese takeout and prepared for a long night of strategic planning and financial projections. But every time his phone rang with another piece of bad news, he thought about Grace's excited face when she talked about showing him her drawing, and about Tiana's quiet disappointment when he canceled their evening together. By Thursday morning, Nathan looked like he hadn't slept in weeks because he hadn't. The meeting with TechMed's board was scheduled for 2 o'clock. And Nathan spent the morning preparing a presentation that outlined every possible reason why they should stay with Rodriguez and Associates instead of accepting Morrison's generous offer. The meeting went better than Nathan had dared to hope. The TechMed board was impressed with his passion and his detailed plans for future development. But in the end, business was business and Morrison's offer was simply too good to pass up. "We're sorry, Nathan," TechMed CEO said as the meeting concluded. "We've genuinely enjoyed our partnership and we wish you the best. But we have shareholders to consider, and Morrison's terms are too favorable to refuse." Nathan shook hands with each board member and maintained his professional composure until he was alone in the elevator. Then he closed his eyes and let himself feel the full weight of what had just happened. Losing TechMed didn't mean Rodriguez and Associates would immediately go bankrupt, but it meant layoffs. It meant cutting salaries and benefits. It meant telling Jake's widow that the company they had built together was struggling to survive. It meant admitting to all the employees who depended on him that he had failed to protect their jobs. Nathan's phone buzzed with a text from Grace, sent from Tiana's phone. "Hi Nathan. I hope your work meeting goes good. Love, Grace." The simple message, with its 5-year-old spelling and unconditional support, nearly broke Nathan's composure entirely. Here was this little girl who believed he could do anything, and he was letting her down along with everyone else. Nathan made it back to his office and closed the door before the tears came. For 5 years he had built his identity around being successful, being in control, being the man who could solve any problem with enough determination and strategic thinking. But this problem was bigger than his determination, and for the first time since his accident, Nathan felt truly helpless. His assistant knocked on the door. "Nathan? Morrison Industries just called. They want to schedule a meeting to discuss their buyout offer." Nathan stared at his reflection in the dark window of his office. Maybe Laura was right. Maybe it was time to accept reality and take Morrison's money. Maybe it was better to surrender with dignity than to keep fighting a battle he couldn't win. But as he reached for the phone to call Morrison Industries, Nathan thought about Grace's drawing of Harold the Duck, waiting at home to be shared with him. He thought about Tiana studying for her medical degree at her kitchen table while he helped Grace with her reading. He thought about the life they were building together, and how much he wanted to be the kind of man who deserved to be part of that life. Nathan put down the phone. He wasn't ready to give up yet. Not on his company, and not on the future he was starting to envision with Tiana and Grace. But he also wasn't sure how much longer he could keep fighting without losing everything that mattered most. Nathan hadn't answered his phone in 2 days. Tiana had tried calling Thursday evening after Grace went to bed, then again Friday morning before work, and both calls had gone straight to voicemail. Her texts received brief, apologetic responses that explained he was dealing with a work crisis but offered no details and no timeline for when things might improve. By Friday evening, Tiana was worried enough to take action. She had Grace's overnight bag packed and ready by 6 o'clock. "Where are we going, Mommy?" Grace asked, watching Tiana gather snacks and juice boxes. "We're going to visit Nathan," Tiana said. "I think he might need some cheering up." "Is Nathan sad?" Grace asked with immediate concern. "I think he might be having a hard time with something at work, and sometimes when people are having hard times, they forget to eat dinner or take care of themselves." Grace nodded seriously. "Like when you were sick last month and you forgot to eat lunch." "Exactly like that." Tiana had gotten Nathan's address from the business card he'd given her weeks ago, though she had never been to his apartment. She wasn't even sure he'd be home, but she had a feeling that if Nathan was struggling, he was probably doing it alone in whatever expensive penthouse he called home. The building was exactly as impressive as she had expected, with a doorman and marble floors and the kind of understated elegance that spoke of serious money. Tiana felt suddenly self-conscious about her casual jeans and Grace's backpack decorated with cartoon characters. "Good evening," the doorman said politely. "May I help you?" "We're here to see Nathan Rodriguez," Tiana said. "I'm not sure if he's expecting us." The doorman called up to Nathan's apartment, and Tiana held her breath waiting for the response. "Mr. Rodriguez says you can go up," the doorman said with a smile. 32nd floor, apartment 3201. The elevator ride seemed to take forever, with Grace bouncing excitedly and asking questions about whether Nathan's apartment would have a view of the park and if they could see their building from his windows. Nathan answered the door looking like he hadn't slept or shaved in days. His hair was disheveled, he was wearing wrinkled clothes that looked like he had slept in them, and his eyes had the hollow look of someone under tremendous stress. "Tiana," he said, his voice rough with surprise and something that might have been relief. "Grace, what are you doing here?" "We brought you dinner," Grace announced, holding up the bag of takeout containers that Tiana had picked up on the way over. "And I brought my Harold picture to show you." Nathan's expression softened as he looked down at Grace's earnest face. "You brought me dinner?" "Mommy said you might forget to eat when you're having work troubles," Grace explained matter-of-factly. "Like when she gets too busy studying and forgets about lunch." "Can we come in?" Tiana asked gently. "If you're not too busy." Nathan stepped aside and gestured for them to enter. Tiana had expected luxury, but she hadn't expected the apartment to feel so cold and impersonal. The furniture was beautiful but looked like it had been selected by a decorator rather than someone who actually lived there. The walls were mostly bare except for a few expensive-looking abstract paintings, and there were no personal touches anywhere that she could see. "This place is huge," Grace said, her voice echoing slightly in the large living room. "Do you really live here all by yourself?" "I do," Nathan said, and Tiana heard a note of loneliness in his voice that made her chest ache. "Don't you get scared at night?" Grace asked. "I would get scared in a place this big." "Sometimes I do get a little lonely," Nathan admitted. Grace nodded sympathetically and took his hand. "Well, we're here now, so you don't have to be lonely tonight." Nathan looked down at Grace's small hand in his, and Tiana saw his throat work as he swallowed hard. "Let's get this food heated up," Tiana said, taking charge of the situation. "Grace, why don't you show Nathan your drawing while I find the kitchen?" The kitchen was enormous and looked like it had never been used for actual cooking. Tiana found expensive appliances that still had protective plastic on some of their surfaces, and a refrigerator that contained only bottled water, condiments, and several containers of leftover takeout. As she heated up the Chinese food they had brought, she could hear Nathan and Grace in the living room. Grace was explaining her drawing in great detail, describing Harold's personality and the way he liked to swim in circles around the pond. "He's very smart," Grace was saying. "Smarter than Penelope because he figured out that if he swims closer to the edge, people can reach him better to give him bread." "That is smart," Nathan agreed. "Animals often know things that we don't expect them to know." "Nathan," Grace said, her voice taking on the serious tone she used for important conversations, "are you having a bad time at work?" There was a pause and then Nathan said quietly, "Yes, Grace. I am having a difficult time with work right now." "What's wrong?" "It's complicated, but basically, some people want to take over my company, and if that happens, a lot of people who work for me might lose their jobs." "That's not fair," Grace said with 5-year-old indignation. "Can't you tell them no?" "I'm trying to, but sometimes in business the people with more money get to make the decisions." "That's a stupid rule," Grace declared. Despite his stress, Nathan laughed. "It really is a stupid rule." Tiana called them to dinner, and they sat around Nathan's formal dining table eating Chinese takeout from paper containers. It looked absurd in the elegant setting, but it also felt right somehow, like they were bringing warmth and life to a space that had been waiting for a family to fill it. "Nathan," Tiana said as they shared lo mein and sweet and sour chicken. "Tell me what's really going on. Maybe talking about it will help." So Nathan told them about Morrison Industries and the buyout attempt and losing TechMed Solutions. He explained about the employees who depended on him and the legacy he shared with Jake and the impossible choice between fighting a losing battle and surrendering everything he had worked to build. "The smart business decision is probably to take Morrison's offer," Nathan concluded. "I'd walk away with enough money to start over somewhere else, and my employees would probably keep their jobs under Morrison's management." "But you don't want to do that," Tiana observed. "I don't want to give up. But I also don't want to drag everyone down with me if I'm wrong about being able to fight back." Grace had been listening to this conversation with the intensity she brought to everything she found important. Now she put down her fork and looked at Nathan seriously. "Nathan," she said, "do you remember what you told me about the third little pig?" Nathan looked confused. "What about the third little pig? You said I was perfect to play her because I'm smart enough to outwit any wolf." "That's right." "Well, you're smart too," Grace said firmly. "And these Morrison people sound like wolves trying to blow down your house. But you built your house out of bricks, didn't you? With thinking legs and helping people and all that important stuff." Nathan stared at Grace and Tiana saw something shift in his expression. "You're right," he said slowly. "I did build it out of bricks. So don't let the wolves blow it down," Grace said matter-of-factly. "That's what the smart pig would do." After dinner, Grace settled on Nathan's couch with her coloring books while Tiana and Nathan cleaned up the kitchen together. "She's right, you know," Tiana said as she rinsed dishes. "About not letting the wolves win. It's not that simple, Tiana. This isn't a fairy tale." "No, it's not. But Grace is still right about the important part. You built something that matters. You're helping people live better lives. That's worth fighting for." Nathan leaned against the counter, watching Tiana move efficiently through his pristine kitchen like she belonged there. "What if I fight and lose everything anyway? What if I make things worse for everyone who depends on me? What if you don't fight and spend the rest of your life wondering what might have happened if you had tried?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "There's something else I'm worried about." "What?" "If I keep fighting and the company fails, I'll lose everything. The apartment, the financial security, all of it. I won't be able to take you and Grace to nice restaurants or give Grace the kinds of experiences I've been able to give her. I'll just be a guy in a wheelchair with a failed business and a lot of debt." Tiana stopped what she was doing and turned to face him fully. "Nathan Rodriguez, are you seriously suggesting that Grace and I care about your money?" "I'm not suggesting. I just want to be able to provide for you. Both of you. Look around this apartment," Tiana said firmly. "It's beautiful and expensive and completely empty of everything that actually matters. Do you know what Grace said to me in the elevator on the way up here?" Nathan shook his head. "She said, 'Mommy, I hope Nathan's apartment has pictures of people he loves like we do.' She was disappointed when she saw that it doesn't." Nathan looked around his living room as if seeing it for the first time. "I never put up pictures. Because you didn't have people you wanted to look at every day. But you do now." Tiana moved closer to him, close enough to take his hands in hers. "Nathan, I fell in love with you when you got on that dance floor in a wheelchair and taught my daughter that dancing isn't about how you move, it's about moving with joy. Grace fell in love with you when you took her questions seriously and treated her like she was worth listening to. None of that has anything to do with your bank account." "You fell in love with me?" Nathan asked quietly. Tiana felt her cheeks warm, but she didn't look away. "Yes, I did. Completely and entirely and without any regard for your financial portfolio." Nathan reached up to cup her face gently. "I fell in love with you too. With both of you. You changed everything for me, Tiana. Before you and Grace I was just surviving. Now I'm living. Then don't give up on the life you're building. Fight for your company. Fight for your employees. Fight for the work that gives your life meaning. And let Grace and me fight beside you." Before Nathan could respond, Grace appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Are you guys done talking about work?" she asked. "Because I found Nathan's TV and it's huge and I thought maybe we could watch a movie together." Tiana and Nathan looked at each other and smiled. "That sounds perfect," Nathan said. "What movie do you want to watch?" "Something with a happy ending," Grace said firmly. "I like stories where the good guys win." As they settled onto Nathan's couch with Grace curled up between them, Nathan felt something he hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. Not the desperate hope of someone clinging to a sinking ship, but the steady hope of someone who wasn't fighting alone anymore. Tomorrow he would call Morrison Industries and tell them he wasn't interested in their buyout offer. He would find new clients to replace TechMed Solutions. He would fight for his company and his employees and the work that mattered to him. But tonight, he would watch a movie with a happy ending with Grace's head on his shoulder and Tiana's hand in his, and remember that the most important battles were the ones worth fighting for. 6 months later, Nathan stood in the same wedding venue where he had first met Tiana and Grace, but everything was different now. The autumn afternoon light streamed through the tall windows, casting golden patterns across the floor where couples had danced that magical evening in spring. Today those same floors would witness a different kind of magic. Rodriguez and Associates had not only survived the Morrison Industries attack but had thrived in ways Nathan never expected. After losing TechMed Solutions, Nathan had been forced to think creatively about growing his business. He had reached out to smaller companies, nonprofit organizations, and international partners who shared his vision of making adaptive technology accessible to everyone who needed it. The breakthrough had come when a documentary filmmaker had approached Nathan about creating a film about his company's work. The resulting documentary, Building Bridges, Technology and Hope, had aired on a major network and had brought Rodriguez and Associates more attention and new partnerships than Nathan could have imagined. "We're not just selling devices," Nathan had explained in the film. "We're selling independence. We're selling the ability to dream big regardless of physical limitations. We're selling hope." The documentary had led to a partnership with a major foundation that provided funding for adaptive equipment in underserved communities. Rodriguez and Associates had doubled its workforce, opened a second research facility, and launched a scholarship program for students with disabilities who wanted to pursue careers in engineering and technology. But the most important change in Nathan's life wasn't professional. It was personal, and it was standing at the altar in a beautiful cream-colored dress, holding a bouquet of red roses and smiling at him like he was the most wonderful thing she had ever seen. Tiana had finished her first year of medical school with top honors, balancing her studies with her work at the hospital and her role as Grace's mother. But now she had help with that balancing act. Nathan had moved out of his sterile penthouse and into a house with a yard where Grace could play and rooms filled with family photos and laughter and all the warmth that had been missing from his life. Grace stood beside Tiana as her maid of honor, wearing a bright blue dress and holding a small bouquet that matched her mother's. She had insisted on being part of the ceremony rather than just watching from the audience. "I want to help you marry Mommy," she had explained to Nathan with 5-year-old logic. "Getting a new family is important work." Nathan had worked with the wedding planner to create a ceremony that included Grace as an active participant. When the minister asked if anyone had objections to the union, Grace would step forward with a special set of vows that Nathan and Tiana had written together. The small audience was filled with people who mattered. Nathan's employees who had become like an extended family over the past months, Tiana's colleagues from the hospital, Grace's teacher and classmates, and Jake's widow who had flown in from Colorado to see Nathan marry the woman who had brought him back to life. As the ceremony began, Nathan felt the same nervous excitement he had experienced 6 months ago when he decided to fight for his company instead of giving up. This was another leap of faith, another decision to choose hope over fear. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Nathan Rodriguez and Tiana Johnson, and to welcome Grace Johnson into their new family." Grace beamed at being mentioned specifically and waved at the audience, drawing chuckles from the wedding guests. The ceremony proceeded with traditional vows between Nathan and Tiana, words about love and commitment and facing life's challenges together. But when the minister reached the part about objections, Grace stepped forward as planned. "Excuse me," she said in her clear 5-year-old voice. "I have something important to say." The minister smiled and nodded. "Please go ahead, Grace." Grace turned to face Nathan, her small face serious with the weight of her responsibility. "Nathan," she said, "I want to tell you some things before you marry my mommy." Nathan leaned forward in his wheelchair, giving Grace his complete attention. "First, you have to promise to always read me bedtime stories even when I get too old for them." "I promise," Nathan said solemnly. "Second, you have to promise to come to all my school plays and science fairs and other important things." "I promise." "Third, you have to promise to take care of my mommy when she's sick or sad or too busy studying to remember to eat lunch." "I promise to take very good care of your mommy." "And last," Grace said, her voice growing softer, "you have to promise to be my daddy for real, not just pretend." Nathan felt his throat close up with emotion. This wasn't part of the planned ceremony. Grace had added this on her own. "Grace," he said, his voice thick with tears, I promise to be your daddy for real. Forever and always. Grace threw her arms around Nathan's neck in a fierce hug, and there wasn't a dry eye in the room. When she stepped back, Grace turned to her mother with equal seriousness. Mommy, you have to promise some things too. What do I need to promise, sweetheart? You have to promise to let Nathan help you with everything, even when you think you should do it all by yourself. Tiana laughed through her tears. I promise to let Nathan help me. And you have to promise to make him chocolate chip cookies when he's had a bad day at work. I promise to make lots of chocolate chip cookies. And you have to promise to love Nathan even when his wheelchair gets stuck in doorways or when people are mean to him. Grace, Tiana said, her voice breaking with emotion, I promise to love Nathan no matter what, forever and always. Grace nodded with satisfaction and stepped back to her place beside her mother. Now you can kiss and be married, she announced to the minister. The official ceremony concluded with Nathan and Tiana's first kiss as husband and wife, and with Grace jumping up and down and clapping with pure joy. At the reception that followed, Nathan sat at the head table watching Grace dance with anyone who would partner with her, her blue dress spinning as she twirled across the floor. Tiana sat beside him, her hand in his, both of them marveling at how perfectly this day had unfolded. Mrs. Rodriguez, Nathan said, testing out the sound of his wife's new name. I like the sound of that, Tiana said, leaning over to kiss his cheek. Daddy Nathan, Grace called from the dance floor where she was teaching Nathan's assistant Laura how to do her signature spinning move. Come dance with me. Nathan looked at Tiana, who smiled and nodded. Go dance with your daughter, she said. I'll be right here when you get back. As Nathan made his way onto the dance floor, he reflected on the incredible journey that had brought him to this moment. A year ago, he had been a lonely man who had given up on the possibility of having a family. He had defined himself by his limitations and his losses, convinced that his accident had ended his chance at real happiness. But Grace had seen past his wheelchair to the man underneath. Tiana had seen his potential for love and partnership. Together, they had shown him that family wasn't about perfect circumstances or ideal situations. It was about choosing to show up for each other, day after day, in all the ordinary and extraordinary moments that make up a life. Are you happy, Daddy Nathan? Grace asked as they danced together, her small hands guiding his wheelchair in gentle circles. I'm the happiest man in the world, Nathan said, and he meant it completely. Good, Grace said with satisfaction. Because now we're a real family and real families are supposed to be happy. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Nathan, Tiana, and Grace stood together in the same spot where Nathan had sat alone just months earlier, feeling invisible and forgotten. Now he was surrounded by love, part of a family that saw him not as broken or limited, but as exactly the person they needed him to be. Ready to go home? Tiana asked, gathering Grace's flowers and small purse. Ready, Nathan said, taking Grace's hand in one of his and reaching for Tiana's hand with the other. As they walked toward their car, Grace swinging their joined hands between them, Nathan thought about fairy tales and happy endings. He had learned that real happy endings weren't about perfect circumstances or problems that disappeared. They were about finding people who loved you enough to face whatever came next together. Nathan Rodriguez had found his people. He had found his family. He had found his happy ending. And it was only the beginning.